Imagine an aircraft that seemed perfect, not too big, not too small, with 3 engines, exactly as many as needed for safety and efficiency. In the 1960s and 70s, TriJets like the Boeing 727, DC-10 and L-1011 TriStar ruled the skies. They crossed oceans when twin-engine jets still weren't allowed to, and they were cheaper to operate than 4-engine giants. They were fast, reliable, and offered spacious cabins. Airlines loved them for their profitability, passengers for their comfort. So why did that perfection almost vanish overnight? Why are TriJets, once the backbone of aviation, now mostly shadows in cargo fleets? Let's examine how the gold standard became obsolete. For most of the jet age, 3-engine aircraft seemed like a brilliant compromise. The ideal balance between risk, economics, and capability. 4 engines meant aircraft like the Boeing 747 or early Douglas DC-8. Massive, expensive to operate, and fuel-hungry. 2 engines meant aircraft such as the Boeing 707, the Comet, or early Caravelle, but they were limited by the 60-minute rule. They could not fly more than 1 hour from a suitable diversion airport. Over oceans, that meant flying far south, at lower altitudes, or not flying at all. 3 engines offered a golden middle ground. Enough power redundancy, lose 1 engine and still complete the flight safely. Range sufficient to cross the Atlantic or Pacific, and operating costs significantly lower than 4-engine aircraft. The Boeing 727 became the first true success story. Introduced in 1964, it quickly became the king of domestic and medium-haul routes across the United States and Europe. Its distinctive configuration, 3 engines mounted at the rear and a T-tail, allowed it to operate from shorter runways at smaller airports that 707s or DC-8s simply couldn't serve. The 727 could take off and land on runways as short as 1,500 to 1,800 meters, climb rapidly, and offered a relatively quiet cabin thanks to its rear-mounted engines. Over 20 years of production, Boeing built more than 1,832 units, making it one of the most produced jet airliners in history. Airlines such as Eastern, Delta, United, Lufthansa, and British Airways built entire fleets around it. It fed hubs, connected mid-sized cities, and remained profitable even at moderate load factors. Then came the wide-body TriJets, true ocean-crossing airliners. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10 entered service in 1971 as a response to the 747, but cheaper and more flexible. With 3 engines, 2 under the wings and 1 in the tail, and a wide cabin seating between 250 and 380 passengers depending on configuration, it quickly became a workhorse for long-haul operations. American Airlines, United, Delta, Northwest, and Lufthansa ordered it in large numbers. The DC-10 became a backbone of transatlantic routes where the 747 was simply too large. The Lockheed L-1011 TriStar followed in 1972. It was a technological masterpiece. The world's first true Category 3 autoland capability, advanced avionics, and the revolutionary high-bypass Rolls-Royce RB211 engine. The cabin was quieter and more comfortable than its competitors. Airlines such as Eastern, TWA, Delta, British Airways, and Cathay Pacific invested heavily in it. On paper, it was the ideal aircraft of the 1970s. 9,000 to 10,000 kilometers of range, better economics than the 747 on medium-density routes, and the reassurance of 3 engines. Airlines built entire business models around TriJets. The hub-and-spoke system worked seamlessly. Passengers from smaller cities would connect via 727s into major hubs, Chicago, Atlanta, Frankfurt, London, and then board DC-10s or L-1011s for intercontinental flights. It was aviation's golden age. Passenger traffic was growing at 10 to 15% annually, fuel was cheap, competition was limited, manufacturers invested billions. Boeing turned the 727 into a mass-market success. McDonnell Douglas rapidly brought the DC-10 to market and secured major airline contracts. Lockheed went all in on the TriStar, even amid financial struggles at Rolls-Royce. Passengers loved them. Spacious cabins, reduced cabin noise, and the psychological comfort of 3 engines. Visible proof of redundancy and reliability. Airlines loved the margins. On high-demand routes, TriJets were profit machines. But that perfection did not last. By the late 1970s, cracks began to appear. The oil crisis of 1973 quadrupled the price of a barrel of oil. In 1979, prices surged again. Suddenly, fuel efficiency was no longer just important. It became a matter of survival. The third engine, once a smart compromise, started to look like excess weight. At the same time, engine technology was advancing at an extraordinary pace. New high-bypass turbofans became more powerful, more reliable, and 20 to 30% more fuel efficient. Two of these new engines could now replace three older ones. And that is when the real decline began. Quiet, but inevitable. TriJets did not lose because of a technical defeat. They lost because the world around them changed faster than they could adapt. This is not a story about a bad airplane. It is a story about how aviation punishes those who fail to keep up with change. The first blow came from fuel economics. The oil crisis of 1973 quadrupled the price of a barrel. In 1979, it surged again. Airlines that had been counting profits on full DC-10s and L-1011s suddenly watched every extra kilogram of fuel erase their margins. Three engines became a luxury. More weight, more drag, more maintenance costs. Mechanics had to climb platforms, disassemble the tail section just to access the third engine. Hours of downtime and millions of dollars. Economics began voting against the TriJet. The second force was technological progress in engines. The 1970s introduced true high-bypass turbofans, the CF6, JT9D, and RB211. They burned 20 to 35% less fuel, were quieter, and significantly more reliable. Failure rates dropped to around 1 per million flight hours. Two of these engines could now produce the thrust that once required three older ones. Maintenance simplified, fewer lubrication points, fewer components to fail. The third engine became a burden. Expensive, difficult to access, increasingly unnecessary. The third and most decisive force was ETOPS. In the 1960s and 70s, twin-engine aircraft were restricted by the 60-minute rule. They could not fly more than 1 hour from a diversion airport over oceans. TriJets had a natural advantage. Lose one engine, and you could still continue safely. But engines became so reliable that regulators could no longer ignore the data. In 1985, the FAA introduced ETOPS 120, soon followed by 180, 207, and eventually 330 minutes. The Boeing 767 and Airbus A300/A330 gained approval for transatlantic operations. On routes like New York to London, a 767 burned 15 to 25% less fuel than a DC-10 and cost less to operate. ETOPS made twin jets the better choice and made the third engine redundant. Then came the tragedies that permanently damaged confidence. The DC-10 suffered devastating accidents. In 1974, Turkish Airlines Flight 981, a cargo door failure that killed 346 people. In 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 in Chicago, where an engine separated during takeoff, killing 273. The technical issues were addressed, but the aircraft's reputation never fully recovered. The L-1011 TriStar faced different challenges. Rolls-Royce went bankrupt in 1971, delaying the program by years. Lockheed lost billions and never recouped the investment. Even when the TriStar performed flawlessly, commercially it struggled. In the 1990s, McDonnell Douglas attempted to revive the concept with the MD-11, an extended DC-10 with greater range, up to 12,000 kilometers, and improved engines. In the cargo segment, it succeeded. FedEx and UPS valued its nose-loading capability and payload capacity exceeding 90 tons. But the passenger version faltered. The center of gravity shifted rearward, landings were more demanding, approach speeds higher. Several incidents damaged confidence. The last passenger, MD-11, operated by KLM, retired in 2014. Meanwhile, aviation philosophy itself shifted. Hub and spoke gave way to point-to-point. TriJets required stable load factors of 80 to 90%. A slight drop in demand meant flying half-empty and losing millions. Twin jets offered flexibility. If demand fell, airlines reduced frequency. In a world of volatile fuel prices, recessions and rising competition, size became risk. It was the same lesson seen with the 747-8. a technical masterpiece that no longer aligned with the new economics. TriJets did not disappear because of a single failure or scandal. They disappeared because aviation is not about nostalgia. It is about cold mathematics. Through the 1980s and 1990s, TriJets still held key routes: transatlantic crossings, domestic US corridors, Europe-Asia connections. The Boeing 727 fed hubs, DC-10s, and L-1011s carried hundreds of thousands across oceans each year, but each new twin-engine widebody, the Boeing 767, 777, Airbus A330, A350, quietly took another share of their market. They could fly just as far, or even farther, while burning 15 to 30% less fuel, with lower maintenance costs, and without requiring a steady stream of 350 to 400 passengers every single day. If demand fluctuated, airlines could simply pause the aircraft, redeploy it, or reduce frequency. A TriJet, once scheduled, demanded high load factors. Otherwise, losses escalated quickly. The last passenger TriJets surrendered their positions gradually, but inevitably. The Boeing 727 operated its final passenger flight in the United States in 2002 with American Airlines and lingered slightly longer in parts of Europe and Asia. The DC-10 lasted longer. Its final scheduled passenger service, operated by Biman Bangladesh Airlines, ended in 2014, though by then it was more of an exception than the rule. The L-1011 TriStar exited passenger service even earlier, with British Airways and Delta retiring theirs in 2001. The MD-11 endured the longest of all. KLM performed its final passenger flight on October 26, 2014, from Sao Paulo to Amsterdam. On board were just 50 passengers, a collection of memories, and a palpable sense that an era was ending. After that, silence. Passenger TriJets disappeared entirely from schedules. Only cargo operators remained. FedEx, UPS, Western Global, Calita still fly MD-11Fs and DC-10Fs because in freight operations, size, a nose-loading door, and 90+ tons of payload still make sense. But even there, they are gradually being replaced by 777s and 747s, 8Fs. Today, when you hear a low, distinctive hum and spot 3 taillights cutting through the night, it is no longer a routine passenger flight. It is likely a cargo MD-11 carrying aircraft parts across continents, or a rare 727 hauling mail somewhere over an empty landscape. It is a final greeting from an era when 3 engines represented the future, when safety was measured by quantity of engines rather than the reliability of each one, when hubs were the center of the world, and point-to-point networks were only an idea. If you ever see an MD-11 gliding through the darkness with its red tail lights glowing, or an aging 727 lifting off from a short runway at a regional airport, take a moment. You are watching a ghost of aviation's golden age, an era that did not end with an explosion, a scandal, or a failed certification. It ended quietly, almost politely, with the phrase aviation repeats more than any other: "Thank you, you are no longer needed." Because even a perfect solution is only perfect for its time, and time always moves on.